Hello, everyone. As you file in, just want to welcome you, let you know you're on the right place. This is the Safety and Health webinar sponsored by Honeywell. Going to allow about another minute for everyone to get settled in. And we thank you for joining us. Again, just letting attendees know as they file in, we're going to get things going in about another 30 seconds, just allowing some time for everyone to get settled in. Looking forward to today's event, and thanks for joining us. Okay, an official hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast, Hearing Industries at Work, sponsored by Honeywell. My name is Kevin Drewley. I'm an associate editor with Safety and Health Magazine and will be moderating today's session. Thanks for joining us. In a few minutes, we'll start a presentation, but first, let's review some preliminary items. The views of today's speakers and organizations are their own and may not necessarily reflect those of the National Safety Council or Safety and Health Magazine. Any mention of a commercial enterprise, product, or publication does not necessarily mean the council or magazine endorses those items. At the end of today's webcast, we'll conduct a question and answer session. To ask a question, simply click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and click the send button. Feel free to ask your question at any time during the presentation. You don't have to wait for the question and answer session to begin. We'll try to answer as many questions as possible, but because of the large number of participants today, we might not get to every question. Any unanswered questions will be forwarded along to today's speakers. At the end of the webcast, you'll be asked to complete a brief evaluation survey. We'll let you know more about that after the presentation. This webcast will be archived, so you can access it after today's live event. To view this webcast and all of our past webcasts, please visit safetyandhealthmagazine.com/events. With that, let's go ahead and get started. Our speakers today are Kevin Chahorski and Kelly McCarthy. Kevin is a national sales manager for hearing and head protection at Honeywell and brings a background in safety products across a wide range of industries. Kelly is a product marketing manager for Honeywell's hearing and hand protection product lines and has more than 25 years of industrial supply experience. Also with us today is Mark Kirsch from Honeywell, who will be helping with questions. Honeywell wants to keep things interactive, so please ask away using the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Again, we thank you all for tuning into this presentation. Kevin, whenever you're ready, go ahead and take it away.
Thank you, Kevin. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Like Kevin said, my name is Kevin Chahorski, and I'm the National Sales Manager for Hearing Protection here at Honeywell. And we're going to talk today about hearing conservation and best practices in different industries that you all may work in. So with that, we'll get started right into it. We'll start off first, just run down the agenda real quick. We're going to start off with some statistics and some definitions just to make sure we're all on the same page with some of the things that we talk about today. We'll dig into some regulations. We'll talk about hearing loss prevention, and then we'll get into the industry-specific information. So just to start off, right, why we're here today, why do we care about hearing protection? As you can see up in the left-hand side of the screen there, over 8 million Americans already suffer from some sort of noise-induced hearing loss. And that has a pretty big societal impact, right? Not just on the individual, but as a society, we pay about $1.5 million in penalties for not protecting workers from noise every year. But the real cost comes in the workers' compensation. It's a very large expense, on average, almost $250 million a year spent on workers' compensation costs for hearing loss disabilities. So that's why we want to really dig into this. We want to be able to protect our workers, know the hazards, be able to assess what we're looking at, and have the proper solutions in place to where we can make sure that our folks are safe and able to hear things when they go home. So just a couple of definitions so we're all on the same page. When we say sound, all we're saying is that we're talking about vibrations that cause variations in air pressure. Noise is simply unwanted sound. Decibels are the unit that we use to measure the intensity of sound. Permissible exposure limits are the maximum exposure allowed before a potential injury occurs. Attenuation is just a reduction of noise. HPD or hearing protection device are devices that lower noise exposure by blocking some of the sound before it enters the ear. NRR, or noise reduction rating, is a laboratory estimate of the amount of attenuation achievable by an HPD. And a PAR, or a personalized attenuation, is the actual amount of attenuation achieved by a specific individual using a specific HPD. So again, what is sound? And what we really want to focus on, right, is that sound is energy. Just a quick little tip. If you see something highlighted in the banner on the bottom of the slide, that's kind of the key takeaway, right? So as I said in the definitions page, it's simply vibrations that cause variations in air pressure, right? The level of those variations are characterized as frequencies measured in hertz. The human ear can hear between 20 and 20,000 hertz. If the variations are fast, it's a high frequency. And if they're slow, it's a low frequency. But the main takeaway, right, is just that sound is energy. So when we talk about hearing protection, what we're trying to do is block some of that energy from reaching our eardrum and potentially causing injury. So what is a decibel? And this is one thing that we really want to spend a little bit of time talking about because it's important to understand how much exposure we're actually dealing with in the workplace, right? So again, they're just a degree of loudness. We use them to measure the intensity of sound by comparing it with a given level on a logarithmic scale. So societally, we're conditioned to think of numbers linearly, right? So if you think of a vehicle traveling and how we measure speed in miles per hour, the difference between 50 and 55 miles an hour, you can't really tell when a car is driving by which one's going that much faster because it's a pretty close number. That's a linear thought of thinking, right? When it comes to decibels, it's logarithmically, so it's more of an exponential increase. The sound energy doubles actually as the level increases by 3 decibels. So that's known as an exchange rate. So every time we increase the decibel rating by 3, we have 2 times the sound. By the time we hit a 30 decibel increase, we've actually increased the amount of energy by over 1,000 times. So this is what that looks like on a scale, right? Excuse me. So as we can see at the beginning, right, because we start off with a low baseline at 70 to 73, while it doubled, it's not that large of an increase. But as we move over to the right, and we can see the difference here between 118 and 121 decibels, it's significantly larger, right? Because you've doubled and doubled and doubled again. So if you're thinking and you're going through a facility and you say, oh, it's 93, 94 decibels, OSHA says we have to be below 90, it's not that loud. In reality, you're more than double the safe exposure limit permitted by OSHA. So we've got to change that way of thinking away from a linear way of thinking when we're talking about decibel ratings. So how loud is too loud, right? What is that permissible exposure limit? We think of a person has a quantity of 85 decibels over an 8-hour workday, kind of at their disposal before a potential injury can occur. But that equal energy principle will tell us that if we double the amount of energy, we have to cut the time in half. So if you go up to 88 decibels, you can only be there for 4 hours before a potential injury occurs. Again, if we go to 91, cut it in half again to 2 hours. And by the time you hit 115 decibels, you've really only got about 30 seconds of exposure before you risk potential injury to your ability to hear. So what is noise-induced hearing loss, right? There's 4 main components that we talk about, right? It's painless. So it causes no pain if the sound is not incredibly loud. So there's obviously exceptions. If you have 120 decibel, explosion go off right next to your head, that's extremely loud. That's going to hurt. But in general, if we're talking about noise exposure, 95, 98 decibels over a given period of time, it doesn't hurt unless you're there for a very, very long time. Causes no visible trauma, leaves no visible scars. You can't look at someone and just know by looking at them whether they have noise-induced hearing loss or not because there's no visible trauma or scars. It's progressive, so it's unnoticeable in its earliest stages. It accumulates with each overexposure, and it takes years to notice a change. So if you've ever been at a rock concert or a stadium and you walk out into the quiet parking lot and you hear your ears start to ring and then it goes away, that's a sign of some level of noise-induced hearing loss. But it's unnoticeable early, right? So that ringing went away, you don't notice that change. It's not until multiple overexposures over a long period of time that you really start to recognize that you're not unable to hear things that you were able to hear before. Maybe you have to turn the TV up louder than you used to. And that's really where we start to notice it in our daily lives away from the workplace. It's permanent, so there's no cure. Once lost, the ability to hear sound cannot be regained, and the only real treatment is using hearing aids. Now with scientific developments, right, things like cochlear implants, we're coming closer to being able to cure it, but they're very cost prohibitive. And at the moment, really, it is a permanent injury. But the good news is that it's preventable, right? Solutions exist to prevent all causes of noise-induced hearing loss. And we'll talk about some of those today. So the U.S. regulations and standards for general industry when it regards to hearing conservation are 1910-95, and for construction, it's 1926-52. So feel free to go look those up to get in a little bit more detail. I'm just going to hit a couple of overviews here. So the first kind of takeaway is that OSHA requires a hearing conservation program be implemented once sound levels reach 85 decibels. They refer to that as their action level, right? You have to take action once your facility reaches an 85 decibel level. Now, here's where they start to kind of differentiate from the scientifically accurate data. And that's that OSHA sets their 8-hour time-weighted average permissible exposure limit at 90 decibels as opposed to 85, where we just talked about that's where the level over 8 hours you have potential for injury. So if you're just following exact OSHA compliant standards, you're putting your folks at risk if they're not wearing hearing protection. Anything above 85, even if you're compliant, you may be still putting your employees at risk. They also use a 5 decibel exchange rate for their PEL requirements instead of the scientifically accurate 3 decibels. So when you're doing those calculations and you're trying to figure out how long workers can be exposed to certain areas, you really want to use that 3 decibel exchange rate if we really want to focus on protecting our workers' hearing and not just being compliant. So what is that hearing conservation program, right? OSHA spells it out pretty cleanly in those standards, but there's 4 main components of it that we'll talk about today. The first of which is noise monitoring, right? We need to know what we're exposed to so we know how to protect against it. It measures noise levels in the work area. It must include all continuous, intermittent, and impulsive sound levels. So it's not just what it is on a average, but if you've got a riveting machine or something else going on in the background, or a hammer drill, something that's impulsive, we have to take those into account as well. And this is a big piece that I see some folks not really realize, but you have to repeat this process whenever there's a change in the work process or area. So if you move a machine or you change a process, you add a shift, you have to redo that noise monitoring because those changes all affect the level of noise in the area. The second stage is audiometric testing. That's used to evaluate whether an employee has experienced noise-induced hearing loss, and that's repeated annually. So the first time someone enters into a hearing conservation program, we do a hearing test, we get their baseline, and then every year we check against that to validate whether or not that they've experienced noise-induced hearing loss. The third component is hearing protection devices, right? Employers must provide HPDs at no cost to the employees. They must provide a variety of suitable HPDs, and that's a direct quote from the OSHA standard. It's relatively ambiguous. One thing we can guarantee is that means more than one, right? So you can't have just one earplug offered to your entire facility and say that you're covered. But they don't add any more specifics. There's recommendations. Different manufacturers have different recommendations. Different experts have different recommendations. What we typically see is once you hit that 50 to 100 employee level, we recommend anywhere between 3 and 5 suitable different HPDs to make sure everyone has one that'll work for them. They must ensure that they're worn, and they must ensure proper initial fit. And then the fourth component's a training program. So employees must be trained on the purposes of HPDs, advantages, disadvantages, and attenuations of all the different types that you're offering, instructions on how to select and fit them, and then obviously how you use and care for them. And that also must be repeated annually. So that's kind of the 4 basic components of a hearing conservation program, right? So what are some of those best practices, right? So you want to start with a thorough noise hazard assessment, inform everyone of those hazards, instruct them on the proper use of fit of the earplugs or earmuffs, depending on the area. And really you want to prioritize the fit and comfort to increase the wear time of the protection, right? So if we're just handing out earplugs and we're saying everybody just take whatever you want, they might not be comfortable. Somebody might not wear them. And what do we always see is if they're not comfortable, the folks just tend to not wear them. They leave them on the cord draped around their neck. They have them halfway sticking out their ears. They're not wearing them properly, so they're not truly protected. And that drives right into why we want to develop a continuous training and testing program, right? We want to adjust based on those threat mixes when they change. We want to, as we have new employees come in, have that continuous training to build a real culture of hearing protection. and then utilize a fit testing equipment to validate the amount of attenuation that each employee is getting. And then again, adjust that mix of products. So before we even get to the hazards, I've talked about this a little bit on the last slide, but we need to understand really that fit and comfort are the most important thing that we see inspire folks to actually wear their hearing protection. And that comes down to 4 or 5 things, right? The shape, the size, the material, how easy they are to put in and take out, and then how we're training the folks, right? So a pretty eye-opening statistic is that inserting an earplug just an eighth of an inch deeper can often make that difference between actual attenuation and no protection at all. Because if you're not getting a good seal, that energy sound, even if the sound is a little bit muffled, that energy is still making its way through the crevices in that broken seal, and exposing your workers to potential injury. So I will toss over to my friend Kelly. She will talk a little bit about some of the industry-specific hazards that we see, and a couple of different issues that we're working. Kelly?
Thanks, Kevin. So as Kevin went through all the statistics and what is, noise and what is noise exposure, we're going to walk through some of the industries where occupational noise exposure is affected. Main one, the manufacturing, utilities, transportation, logistics, mining, oil and gas, and construction. Okay, Kevin. So manufacturing, okay, where, you're not gonna be surprised by some of these numbers, but 1 in 9 workers have hearing impairment. Manufacturing is the #1 occupation for hearing loss. So if we take a look at these numbers, 40%, 46% of workers have been exposed to hazardous noise. But of those 46, 28 report not wearing any hear protection. So it's not surprising that more than half, 18%, have reported hearing problems. So it just all works together. The numbers don't lie. Without the hearing protection, you're going to have a higher rate of reported hearing issues. 11% of those have tinnitus. Sorry about that. And that goes to, what is tinnitus? Well, tinnitus is that ringing and buzzing in your ears from prolonged exposure to loud noise. And that's one of the beginning causes of hearing loss. And when your workers land up with these issues of tinnitus, there's a whole host of other things that actually happen to the workers. Anxiety, depression, difficulty sleeping, which leads to decreased concentration, memory problems, fatigue. So severe cases can be debilitating. They can interfere with daily activities, work, and this is all preventable with proper hearing protection. So let's go to the next slide, Kevin. Okay, here we have the utilities. And again, some of the highest percentage of workers with hearing difficulties, workers with hearing loss, they're more likely to get injured on the job. So, as we go through these numbers, there's over 500,000 utility workers in the US. 43% of workers in the utilities have been exposed to hazardous noise. That's an astonishing number. 38% of those noise exposed workers, again, not wearing hearing protection. So 27% of the utility workers have hearing difficulty. And this is all preventable, again, with hearing protection. So if we take a look at some of the major sources, your steam turbines, your air-cooled condensers, all these heavy machinery that may not seem like it, but the constant noise that these generate is what is affecting the workers. Okay, Kevin, the next slide, please. Transportation, logistics, and warehousing. Okay, may not seem like warehousing. would be an area where you would find a lot of noise. But you've got all those conveyor belts and the forklifts. And it's not just the ones that are running the heavy machinery. You've also have, in your warehouses, you have your, some warehouses, you have pickers and other people that aren't actually using the heavy machinery, but the constant noise is in the background. And they don't realize that within those areas, they are still being affected by the background noise. So again, all the numbers are here. The percentage of workers that are being affected by these background noises and these day-to-day activities within their workspaces. This is what's affecting, and this is where the hearing loss is coming in. And, it's preventable. And we just need to get them fitted correctly so that we can prevent this for them. Okay. Oil, mining, gas. The noise is part of every day. At certain levels, at these levels, you can see them. They are hazardous. They are hazardous. So, I'm sorry. 61% of all workers within those exposed noise areas. 28% of them are not wearing hearing protection. 23 workers have hearing, 23% have hearing difficulty. So again, and then the tinnitus, 11% of these workers have tinnitus. This is extremely dangerous to your workers.
I think, Kelly, if I can chime in for a quick second, I think one of the key takeaways, right, when we think about these types of industries, when we think about, mining, oil and gas, we're all aware that these are very loud environments that folks are in. So why are so many people not wearing hearing protection? And really what we see, right, is not that they're not wearing hearing protection at all. It's that when they move from different parts of the facility, different parts of the oil rig, right? If we look on the right-hand side, we can see certain areas are very, very loud, right? 115, 116, 110 decibels. If we look at, in the vac truck, in the rig engine rooms, pump trucks, things like that, very loud. So someone's wearing their hearing protection when they're in those areas. What we see happen a lot of times is they'll move to a quieter part of the facility and they'll say, okay, I'm out of my noise hazard, right? So I'm going into a quieter area so I can take my hearing protection off, because you can tell the difference when you move from one area of the facility to the other, not realizing that even in that quote unquote quieter part of the facility, it's still potentially hazardous exposure levels, right? So if you're moving from working on a vac truck or in the rig engine room, and then you go to the rig floor and it's going from 107, 110 decibels in the engine room down to 88, 89, 90, you're going to think that's a lot quieter. So you're going to take your hearing protection off. And we see this happen all the time. So when we say that there's 28% of folks, not wearing hearing protection, it's not in the obvious spaces. And that's what we really have to be thinking about, right? As safety professionals, we've got to be making sure that our folks are aware that just because it's quieter doesn't necessarily mean that it's quiet, and still has potential to expose them to hazardous noise levels. Sorry to jump in, Kel. I'll toss it back to you.
Fine. Thank you.
Yep, no problem.
And lastly, we have our construction industry, which this construction industry, has workers have the highest level of hearing loss than workers in most industries. Power tools, mobile equipment, other sources of hazardous noise present in the construction site. Workers have multiple reasons to wear hearing protection. 52% of construction workers report not wearing hearing protection. 3 out of 4 construction workers are exposed to hazardous noise levels on job sites. Non-residential building construction, highway and bridge construction, and heavy and civil engineering. So, again, there is no medical, like Kevin said, no medical or surgical treatment for hearing loss caused by noise. So And you can see the numbers of the common noise levels, jackhammers, your road work construction. You never see any of these workers with, hearing protection. And this is where it comes from.
I
Okay.
think that
Oh,
I think that this is probably the industry with the most opportunity for improvement, right? And it comes down to a couple of things. Um, Very loud tools being used in construction, right? We've all been, even if we don't work in construction, we've been around construction sites. Even if you're just walking downtown and there's a city, a new building being built, and you're just walking down the sidewalk, you can hear how loud it is. And a lot of times, right, the person actually running the tool is wearing their hearing protection, right? If you've got a guy on a jackhammer, or if you've got someone running a table saw, or you've got folks drilling into concrete, you'll see them wearing their hearing protection a lot. Where we see a miss is in the folks that aren't actually doing the loud activity. So if you've got multiple trades on site at the same time, like most construction sites do, you might have an electrician working in the same room that someone, a framer's still working in, and he's got his table saw running on the other side of the room. That electrician is thinking, well, hey, I don't have any loud noise. I'm not doing anything loud. I'm okay. Not realizing how close they are and how loud that saw is because it's not part of their day-to-day life. So I think there's an opportunity here for cross training across some of the trades and helping them realize that it's not just about what you're doing, but the overall noise environment. Again, construction is the largest area of opportunity. It also poses the most challenges, right? Because as we talked about in the standards and the regulations and the best practices for hearing conservation programs, step one is the noise assessment, right? That hazard assessment. And you're supposed to redo that hazard assessment every time there's a change in the work area or the work process. Well, simply by the nature of construction, changes constant, right? You're building as you go. So you're adding new walls, you're adjusting those hazards on the fly. So it's very, very difficult to get a accurate noise hazard assessment. So that's why we have to start seeing, hearing conservation being part of the site culture in general across all trades, and not just limited to the folks that are running the loud equipment. So then here we put together a chart for just kind of a color coded comparison, so you can see where your industry stacks up. Right, the percentages of folks that are exposed to hazardous noise, the noise exposed workers not wearing hearing protection, workers that already have difficulty hearing, workers that actually have tinnitus, material hearing impairment, and then hearing impairment in both ears. And again, right, if you look just based on the comments that I said, if you look at the construction industry, how many folks already have that hearing impairment? Well, that lines up directly with, not wearing their hearing protection. Where we see, a surprise in the data, right, is in transportation and warehousing. There's so many folks that aren't wearing hearing protection, but they don't have that hearing impairment already show up in place. It's a bit of an anomaly. So probably exposed to lower levels of that exposure. So it's going to take a longer time for them to notice it. So as that workforce starts to age and switches into other roles, younger folks come in, they don't necessarily report that. And those folks that are working in that industry now are going to see these long-term effects down the line in the rest of their life. So that's just a little bit of a color comparison so you can see, really what you need to be focusing on depending on what industry you're working. So how do we start talking about hearing, right? How do we start having these conversations with our employees, right? The only good PPE is PPE that's worn and worn correctly. If I've handed an employee a pair of earplugs and all they do is rest it on the cord around their neck, that doesn't really do them anything. In fact, it does absolutely nothing because they're not wearing it at all. So how do we encourage people to take ownership of this, especially when it's not a in your face kind of hazard, things like respiratory protection or fall protection or gloves for cutting your hands, right? It's not something that we're constantly thinking about because it takes so long to notice the difference. So how do we start talking about it, right? One thing, right? How many styles are being used, right? Are there folks that are wearing earplugs and earmuffs? And how many styles are being offered? If we're only offering one or two different styles of earplugs, and we walk around and we see our people with the earplug sticking halfway out of the ear on half of our employees, we know that we probably need to start adding some variety, adding some variation, some different styles, some different sizes, so that folks will actually be encouraged to wear them and wear them properly. Are they actually wearing their HPDs, right? This seems so obvious, but I've mentioned it a couple of times. Are the earplugs or the earmuffs just resting around their neck? But the less obvious one, right, is are those HPDs being removed to have conversation or to listen to equipment? If you're a service tech in an area and you've got to listen to a machine to hear if it's ticking, it's difficult, right? Because you just take out a passive earplug. That's when you might need to step into something a little more advanced, something like an electronic earmuff that still allows you to hear the environment around you, but at a reduced volume so that you can hear the work that you're doing at the level that you need while remaining safe. Are they being worn properly? And I have a different slide. I think I left it out of this presentation, but the proper way to wear an earplug is one of the critical pieces that we see missed probably more than anything else. Our disposable earplugs are probably the most common HPD that you see in any industry, just the little foam disposable earplugs. While it's the most common, I also say that it's the most commonly misused type of PPE because folks aren't wearing them properly. You walk around, you see people, with the earplug sticking out past the ear. And that happens because they just aren't trained on the proper way to insert it, right? So you have to roll that foam down, straighten out your ear canal, and then insert the earplug. And that final step that we always see people miss is you have to hold that earplug in place so that foam can expand and create a proper seal in your ear. When you don't hold that earplug, the path of least resistance for that expansion to happen is back out the ear, and that's how we create gaps in the seal. And that's why you see them sticking out past, and that's why a lot of these folks, even though they're wearing their hearing protection, are still getting hearing loss, right? And then when it comes to earmuffs, right, are the earmuffs covering both ears completely? Are people, again, lifting one muff up to have a conversation? And then something that we don't think about, but has a big impact is what other PPE are they wearing? Specifically, when we're talking about earmuffs, right? Thick templed safety glasses are going to break the seal of that earmuff, reducing the amount of attenuation. It's going to allow some of that energy to go through where that seal is broken and expose our folks to that hazardous noise. So if you're offering earmuffs in your facility, take a look at what type of safety glasses you're using. You might need to go to a different safety glass that has a thinner temple, so it's not creating such a gap in the seal. And then again, variations in that noise level, right? Are they constant in the area, or are there impacts and impulses, right? If the area is constantly at 83 decibels and we're not having hearing protection, but every 15 minutes, a steam valve releases and it releases at 110 decibels, well, that's loud enough to create hazard, right? So we need to make sure that we're offering hearing protection for that, even though it is only intermittent noises, right? And then do those noises vary from area to area? Are our people moving from one area of the facility to the other? This is what we talked about, in the oil and gas industry. We see that happen a lot. People will be working in one area that's a lot louder, wearing their hearing protection, and move into a quieter area and taking it out because they think that they're in a safe environment now. So these are just some of the things that you can be looking for when you're walking around your facilities, when you're having conversations with your people, to really start having that conversation to build a culture of hearing conservation. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our product offering. And it's not a shameless sales plug, although I am the sales leader, so might be a little bit of that. But really just to illustrate, right? Honeywell is a for-profit company. If we could make one earplug that would work for everyone, we absolutely would do it. But they're not one size fits all. It's a very common misconception in the marketplace that we can just grab one set of earplugs and it'll work for everyone, right? So we have streamlined our portfolio to try to make things simple. We have 5 different styles of disposable earplugs. They look very similar, but their formulation is different. Their comfortability level is different, right? Then you can get into reusable earplugs. So when we talk about those disposable earplugs on the top, they're truly disposable. They're single use, which means the second they come out of your ear canal, they're supposed to go straight into the garbage. whether they have a cord or not. Just because they have a cord does not mean that they're reusable. So they're single use. But if you need to have, be going in and out of different areas, putting earplugs in and out repeatedly, regularly, that's where a reusable earplug, or on the right, our TrustFit line is what we call a hybrid earplug, really comes in handy. So the silicone-based earplugs can be reused for up to 30 days with proper use and care, right? So a little bit of, Dawn dish soap and water, keep them clean, keep the dirt and grime off of them, and you can use them for 30 days. And then the foam hybrid plugs, which are a little bit more comfortable. They give you that comfortability of a foam disposable earplug, but with the reusable aspect of the silicone plugs. Those, because you're not actually rolling it down and you're not touching that foam during the insertion process, they have that stem on the end. Those can be reused for up to 5 days with proper use and care. And then there's metal detectables, depending on what industry you're in. Those are really only used in the food and beverage, with a couple of other limited exceptions. And then again, we've got multiple dispensers just for ease of use, right? So when I say that there's solutions to every form of noise-induced hearing loss, there's ways to protect against it. It is truly a preventable hazard. This is how we do it, right? And this is where it comes in, is even though it's the same earplug, there's different styles and varieties that you can choose from. So if you want to have a dispenser, if you want to have individual packages, if you want to have individual boxes, whatever's most convenient for your site, your facility, whatever you're using, there's all sorts of different ways that you can do that. And then again, same thing with our earmuff line, right? So we've streamlined it. There's 3 different styles. There's a low, a medium, and a high attenuating muff. And then it's all on how you attach it. So people say, well, I've got to wear a hard hat. I can't wear earmuffs. Well, we have solutions for that, right? You can do a behind the neck, or you can attach on the, directly onto the hard hat. We have folks saying, well, I'm working in an electrical environment. I can't have any metal. Cool. We've got a dielectric line, all plastic line to help prevent that. So hearing protection, our hearing loss is truly 100% preventable, as long as we know the hazards, as long as we know what type of environment that we're in. There's solutions to protect against just about anything you could come up with. So with that, we will jump into the Q&A. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Great job, Kevin and Kelly. Thank you so much for sharing your insights and your expertise. Before we do start the Q&A, just want to let everyone know about the evaluation survey that we're asking you to complete. The survey will open in a different screen after this webinar, and your input's very important to us as it helps us improve our future webcasts. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, I know there are several in the queue, just click the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen, type your question, and click the send button to submit. And if we don't get to your question today, all unanswered questions will be forwarded along to our speakers. And with that, we will get going with the Q&A. To start, this question asks, if we hire temps or self-contractors, do we need to provide testing within certain time of hire date, or can we wait till we have our annual on-site mobile unit at the end of the year?
So the general rule of thumb is that you have to get the baseline hearing test performed the moment that the employee enters into the hearing conservation program. So even if it's a temp, you have to have that baseline done, and then you repeat that annually to see if there's been hearing loss that has occurred.
Thank you.
As far as a specific time of the hire date, I'm not 100% sure, but I can definitely look into that and reply back offline. If maybe Kevin, you could send me the question and the contact information of the folks that asked it, I'd be happy to reply offline.
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. Next question asks, what variety is recommended by OSHA? Is it earplugs, earmuffs, etc.? And is that what the meaning implies?
That is the $10 million question. It is incredibly ambiguous. We have asked for clarity a number of times. There are a lot of appendices out there. There really isn't a guarantee. It kind of depends on the OSHA inspector on how they interpret that. I don't think there's a clear interpretation. I just saw Mark popped onto camera. He might have a better answer for us, but it is one of those ambiguous standards.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think in the past we've recommended a variety of both sizes and types of material. So whether it's a foam earplug versus something that's a little bit more rigid. Some people have dexterity issues. If you can tell, when Kevin was talking about the eighth of an inch, I was showing, how to properly, insert your earplug. But like there might be dexterity issues. People can't move as well. So for them, they're not going to be able to get a proper fit from a standard foam disposable earplug. And that's kind of what it means. Like you got to find something that's going to work for the widest range of your employees. Some people have small, teeny tiny ear canals. Some people, you need a bigger, heavier duty, denser foam for it. And again, it's like as much about the personal feel and comfort as it is having a T shape versus a cylinder, because people are shaped differently, and it's the only PPE you're wearing inside your body, and that's it makes it very personal to you, and that's why you gotta get it right. You can't just leave them kind of dangling off the side of your head, because it needs to do its job. So I don't know. That was all I had to add. I mean, it's again offering usually a couple of different sizes or maybe different densities. That way you can make sure that at least it's comfortable and somebody's wearing it. And then the training is what's hopefully going to help you get them to wearing it right.
Absolutely. Thank you, Mark.
Yeah, thank you both. As we move on now to the next one, this one asks, if an employee hearing exam shows a 10 decibel difference on a certain decibel level, do we need to report it on the 300 log sheet?
Yes, a 10 decibel shift is considered a standard threshold shift. So that would be a recordable.
Have you done a hearing loss study on the entertainment industry? The questioner says that working concerts is very loud, and since the shows change regularly, the noise levels also can fluctuate. Most employers don't have a hearing conservation program, and you're just told where to find earplugs if you want them.
So
I
we have.
well, I was going to say, Kevin, I came off of
Go for it, Mark.
this one because
Go for it.
no, just partly just one of my areas and one of my passions. I think when I was a teenager, I worked security at a concert hall, and so I know that I've got damage on the left side of my left ear, right? Because I would always be working stage right, like I was facing the audience, but I was working security, and I was right next to those big gigantic tower speakers during Jethro Tull, Leonard Skinner, Motley Crue, like you name it. But it adds up, because at the end of the night I would have that tinnitus and the ringing in my ear. I think we treat it as much as like if you're going to a venue and you see that big burly 300-pound security guard wearing an earplug, it's probably a smart idea. They know what they've been doing it long enough. They know that they need to. I don't know if you had anything to add there, Kevin. I know it's a tough one because it's a lot of temporary workforce.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. So we haven't actually conducted a study. I think it'd be really interesting to explore. That being said, it is becoming a lot more prevalent, and certain jurisdictions actually have. So an example is Las Vegas now actually requires that their club promoters wear hearing protection, because the nightclubs are so loud, and if they're working, they actually have to wear hearing protection in those nightclubs. So there's certain jurisdictions that have started to take consideration. But no, we have not conducted an official study.
I mean, the allowed rock concert is around 115 decibels, which is just shy of a chainsaw. So when you think about would you put on your earmuffs or your hearing protectors when you're using a chainsaw? Probably a good idea at a loud rock concert. Even worse, like one of the ones like where I get it the most, or where I get the ringing in my ear, is when I go to sporting events. And it's just when there's usually something really good happening, and then it's so loud that it like my hearing will go out, and it just gets that muted feeling. And I know that's it's too loud for the environment, but you tend to not want to carry an earplug with you. Or I think NASCAR's gotten really good with it as far as entertainment venues. They typically have vendors that give them away, or they'll give them to you on the way in. But it's as much of that person. You almost think about it as like the industrial noise versus the personal noise. When you think of a concert, it's kind of mixing the two worlds when you work in a personal area like music. But I know we also tend to make some earplugs that have a better acoustic range that allows you to still hear the music while being protected as well. So good
Right.
question though.
I'm resisting using a bad Jethro Tull pun, and thanking you for living in the past to share your experience. But
That was a very interesting show. I
I
will
bet.
I will just say it was a very interesting show.
All righty. Moving on. This one is asking, it's a question, but also a request if you might backtrack in the slide deck if possible. Just saying, if we have time, could we please re-review the slide that shows the 30 seconds of exposure for 115 decibels? And then it's also wanting to get a little more information about even if the temp agency provides their own supervision over the temp.
Okay.
I think
So
they were the ones who asked about like doing the audiometric
yeah,
testing. Okay.
yep. So I can definitely go back and review that slide if we've got time after the end of the questions. And then as
Okay.
far as if the temp agency is providing supervision over their temps, then no, the onus falls on who is actually employing the employee. So the onus would fall on the temp agency to have that testing conducted and provide the data.
But I
Why
think
did
I'll just add, I think even in my own personal course of business or hiring contractors to work on my house or my flooring, I set out a box of earplugs and I said that if you're not wearing these, you're not working here. Like I take a very a dramatic flair for that, right? Like we're in this business because we care about protecting people and protecting their safety. So we're required, even at Honeywell, we sign a contract annually. Like if you see something that's being done unsafe, you're supposed to say something. So I've on numerous occasions I've stopped my truck, I've gotten out, I've offered hearing protection to somebody who's working with a jackhammer without hearing protection or who's doing something on the side of the road, right? Like it's at least my little way of at least spreading the love and giving them some hearing protection. But if you see something and you know that it's going to damage their hearing long term, at least mention them. And Kevin had some of those helpful tips on that slide of just, hey, are you thinking about this? Are you, what would you like to use? What can we offer you? Is a good way to do that.
For the individuals who would wear hearing aids, do you recommend they remove them to wear over the ear hearing protection?
So it depends on this type and style of hearing aid and whether they'll fit over. The challenge if you remove the hearing aid, right, is that you may actually end up with what we consider over protection. So if you put an earmuff on someone that's hearing impaired, they may not be able to hear warnings or alerts or alarms that come up in the facility. So we actually designed our passive line of VeriShield earmuffs with the widest ear cup opening on the market with just that in mind. So again, if you want to, Kevin, if you want to send me the contact information for that individual, I'd be happy to send a product sample because there are some really good solutions out there that you can wear over your hearing aid, again, depending on the style of hearing aid that's being used. Some of the newer ones are a lot smaller, a lot more form factor, look more like an earbud or like an AirPod kind of style. The older ones that have the big bulky battery pack are a little bit difficult to get over.
Yeah, no, I absolutely can do that. No, thank you for that. I know you kind of delved a little bit into a possible response here in your last one, but could you clarify when do you need double protection?
Yeah, so really what you need to do is reduce your exposure below 85 decibels. So if you're unable to do that, but as a PEL, right? Not totally below, but as a TWA PEL. If you're able to do that, if you're unable to do that with single protection, then you have to add double, right? Now, the thing when we talk about double hearing protection is you don't get to add the NRRs together. So if you're wearing a 30 decibel earmuff and a 30 decibel earplug, that does not mean that you have 60 decibels of attenuation. Really, the best practice and the good rule of thumb is that you can add 5 decibels to the highest rated piece of hearing protection that you have. So in that example that I gave of wearing a 30 ear muff and a 30 ear plug, you'd really only be able to count 35 decibels of attenuation. And the reason for that, guys, is that, like I kind of tried to hammer the point home at the very beginning, right? Sound is energy, okay? And the easiest way we hear, the easiest mode for that energy to get into our ear canals is directly through the openings of our ears. But it's not the only way that energy gets transferred, right? So there's jawbone conduction. In fact, they've actually got new Bluetooth headphones that you wear outside of the ear, and it picks up on the vibrations as you talk through your jawbone. So there's other methods and avenues for that energy to enter. You cannot really reduce that decibel rating. On average, really more than 40, 42 decibels as kind of a grand total, no matter the rating of the HPDs that you're using. And kind of an example, right? To take it back to the rock concert, if you're ever standing in front of a loud bass speaker, you're standing in front of someone playing drums, you feel that sound hit you in the chest, right? You can feel that sound energy. So if you're feeling it, it's making its way into your body. You cannot reduce energy entering into your ear canal or into your eardrum just by earplugs if it's got other modes of entry.
Next question asks, can prolonged exposure to chemicals used at work cause hearing loss?
Yes. So they're ototoxic chemicals. I'm not going to have nearly enough time to dig into details on that, but that's one that, Kevin, again, if you'd like to send me the information, I will happily take that offline. That's a very, very detailed conversation that needs to be had. It's certain chemicals, certain exposures, absolutely can.
A lot of the ones that end in ENE, styrene, toluene, xylene, benzene,
Yep.
hexane. Also, like a lot of the carbon monoxide, we have a lot of firefighters that have a lot of prolonged exposure to carbon monoxide and find that they've gotten a lot of hearing loss as well in different conversations that we've had with different people. But yeah, it's a whole different ball of wax. It's a different animal to think about that stuff too, but less commonly discussed. But yeah, I think that's a good conversation to continue.
Backtracking to that 10 decibel difference, this question asks, if we have an employee do a retest within the same month of the last hearing test and the results have improved, are those new results then sufficient to avoid having to report on a 300 log?
I don't know the specific answer to that question, but again, if you want to send me that one offline, I can dig into the details and get back to you.
Absolutely. This one gets a little not so much personal, but deals a little bit more with the staff there at Honeywell. And it asks, do you have an occupational audiologist on staff there?
Yes, we do have a position of occupational audiologist here at Honeywell. At the moment, that position is vacant. We had a really great lady named Jackie DiFrancesco who left the organization a little while ago, and we have not backfilled that role yet, but we do have that position available at Honeywell.
She went to a testing laboratory, but she's
Yes, she did.
incredibly talented. So we miss Jackie. She was awesome.
Yes.
If she's out there listening somewhere.
Yeah.
At what sound level is double hearing protection no longer protective?
Thank you.
So it's never not protective, right? It's how much protection you're able to get. So it's a very roundabout way of saying there's not really an answer to that question, right? So you're always going to be able to reduce the amount of sound. It's just how far you can reduce it. So you have to look at it based on the PAR. So if the best I can get with double hearing protection with the devices that I have is 35 decibels, and now we've got to take our time weighted average personal exposure limit calculation and take that level to which we're able to reduce it to and set our PEL there, right? So if the best we can do, because the area is so loud, is get it down to 105 decibels, even wearing hearing protection. Well, now we've got to do our PEL calculations and make sure that we're only staying in there for, off the top of my head, I think it's roughly an hour um, at 105 decibels. So it just depends. There's really not an answer to say when it's not protective. You just have to be able to reduce it down as low as you can, and then calculate your TWA PELs from there.
Yep. Rotate your staff. Do the things that you can.
Yep.
Can bone conduction headsets cause hearing loss too?
They can. It depends on the technology and the style. We don't have any of those products offered here at Honeywell, so I'm not as technologically versed in exactly the different styles and how they work. But yes, absolutely. If it's a vibration, and you have to turn up, the amount of vibrations to get the volume to a certain level for you to be able to hear it. If it exceeds, now I don't know if the vibrations for those are set to where it's a limit below potential injury occurring. But that would be something you'd want to look into based on the manufacturer of the product.
It's more alarming the earbuds or AirPods or whatever, that they have noise cancellation, and so people think that they're hearing protection where they're not. They're clearly, like, if you're using them and you're listening to music at a loud decibel level, and then further compounding that with working on a construction site with a jackhammer, you're now amplifying your exposure risks incredibly higher than you should be. I think I wrote an article a couple of years ago on that topic, and the jaw induction and those ones are newer than what I had when I wrote on that a while ago. But it's an interesting topic because it's like a safety manager will see somebody has something in their ear and they think that that's okay. But if you're listening to music already at a loud level and you're not protecting fully, it's probably blocking a little bit, like, 7 or 8 to 10 to 12 NRR, but it's not doing the job of the foam or a dense, a dense material that's actually helping to block out that vibration of sound. So
yeah, there's a
that's
distinct difference between hearing protection and noise cancellation, right? And if we think back to the definition slide at the very beginning, right, HPDs are devices that lower the amount of sound entering the eardrum before that sound enters your ear, right? Noise cancellation uses a technology of opposing frequencies based on microphones and speakers to help basically offset the amount of that noise that comes through. And it does reduce that energy level, but it's not reducing it to the same way, and it's not blocking it out, right? It's using opposing frequencies to quote unquote cancel what you can hear.
Yeah, I think they said like back when the WHO did the analysis, they said over 1 billion young people worldwide are at risk of hearing loss because of unsafe listening practices.
Yep.
At least, like, my kids are great with it. They'll ask me to turn things down. I'm like, proud dad moment, right? When you have that, but it's you help instill good behaviors as far as protecting your ears now.
Shouldn't
but
have spent so much time at rock concerts when you were young, so you could still hear. Like, you didn't have to turn your TV up so loud, Mark.
I know. I think that was where maybe Kevin was going to make the Jethro Tull joke of unwanted noise. Was that what he's going to do? I think maybe.
You read my mind.
I try to do that. NIOSH app for sound measurement. Great
Yes.
question. I have it on my phone. If
It,
that's you can use that as an unofficial endorsement, but
it's an excellent tool, but
no.
its performance is limited based on the hardware that you're using and what phone that you're using. So it is a great visualization. It's a great talking point tool. It's a great generalized baseline if you want to get a rough idea, but it is not a replacement for a sound level meter or a dosimeter.
It's a good questions. I think really great engaged audience. I think we're probably, I know
Right.
Kevin, you're
Yeah.
keeping an eye on it. Are we at
We're
time,
we're getting there. We
sir?
have is there enough time to review that PEL slide, or I know we're getting
Yeah,
close to the top of the hour.
I can slide my presentation back as quick as I can. All right. I think this is the one that he was asking about. So again, right, what we've got 85 decibels over an 8-hour period is your permissible exposure limit. The scientifically accurate permissible exposure limit. When we double the energy, right, and if we're using the scientifically accurate data, not just the OSHA regulation, energy doubles every 3 decibels that it increases. So if we increase the energy by 2, we have to reduce the amount of time that we spend in that energy also by 2. So going from 85, if you got 8 hours at 85 and you double that energy and go to 88, go down to 4 hours. If you double it again to 91, you go down to 2 hours. You doubled it again to 94, you're at 1 hour, 97, half hour, 100, 15 minutes, right? And it keeps going down. And that once you hit that 115 decibel level, you got 30 seconds of exposure. Now, what the person, for clarity, right, that doesn't mean that 30 seconds of 115 decibels is going to cause hearing loss. Everyone is different, but it is the level at which potential for injury occurs. But to Mark's point, right, rock concerts get up to 110, 115, 118 decibels, and you're there for an hour and a half. That's when you walk out into the parking lot and you have that ringing in your ear, right? That is a form of hearing loss. The human body is a miraculous thing, right? Our brain fills in some gaps. So if we've lost the ability to hear one specific frequency, our brain, recognizes and kind of fills in some of those gaps. But as it compounds on itself and you start to lose the ability to hear, more and more frequencies over time, that's where those gaps kick in and you realize, wow, I can no longer hear, this one particular sound. We've had people make jokes and say, oh, I can use that and say that I can say I actually can't hear my wife and I can just ignore her. And that's a terrible joke, but it is actually a little bit of truism to that. One of the first frequencies that you start to lose corresponds directly with the frequency range of the female speaking voice. So you don't really start to notice it. It's not like one little frequency. You've gone to this rock concert and you've ruined your hearing. I think probably everyone on this call has been in a loud environment like that, and they can still hear. But it's when it compounds on itself that you really start to notice it and how it affects your life.
Well, thank you. Unfortunately, we have run out of time. I'm sorry that we didn't get to everyone's questions, but all today's unanswered questions will be forwarded on to our speakers. And as Kevin indicated, he'll be taking some others offline. We'll get that information to him. So once again, we hope you all take the time to fill out that forthcoming evaluation survey to give us your feedback. And with that, we end today's Safety and Health Magazine webcast. We'd like to thank Kevin Sikorsky, Kelly McCarthy, Mark Kirsch, everyone at Honeywell, and all of you who listened in. Thanks and have a great day.